Susan Elaine Rancourt was born on October 12, 1955 in 𝙎𝙐𝙎𝘼𝙉, Washington, USA as a daughter to Vivian and Dale Rancourt. Susan had 3 sisters named Judy, Sandra and Stacy and 2 brothers named Dennis and Thomas. Susan was shy, smart, studious and curious young girl. She had excellent grades at school, excelled in learning and loved reading. Her mom recalled that Susan was the kind of person who would have learning forever. She was known for her healthy lifestyle and common sense. In high school, she was a cheerleader and a homecoming queen. Her family called her Miss Prudent Pure Heart. She was a student at Central Washington State College in Ellensburg, where she studied biology. Her professors described her as a completely normal, nice girl who didn't stand out in any way, and some said Susan was quite remarkable. After having expensive dental work done on her teeth, including a gold cap and bridge, she always brushed and flossed them. She was jogging regularly, because she wanted to lose some weight. She served as a tutor in German and science classes for other students at the school, worked at a nursing home and sewed patches on uniforms for campus police officers. On April 17, 1974 she put a laundry in the student laundry room and went to Munson Hall for a meeting for students interested in becoming resident assistants, a role which among many other things, involves helping other students and ensuring their safety. The meeting went well and ended at 10 p.m. Susan wasn't planning on going back to her room on campus yet because she was going to watch a movie with her friend at her house, but she never showed up there. She also didn't take her laundry, which was still in the laundry room. Susan never returned to her dormitory. She wasn't the type of person who would take off without telling anyone. She was not an adventurous free spirit who liked to hitchhike. Instead, she was rather safe and predictable. At the time she was preparing for her midterm finals. She never skipped class and people who knew her were sure she wouldn't miss an important exam. Her roommate reported Susan's disappearance to campus security officer Bill Clayton, who informed his boss, Alfred Pickles. Susan's parents were living in Anchorage, Alaska at the time, but when they found out about their daughter's disappearance, they came to Ellensburg immediately. According to Susan's mom Vivian, when her father Dale found out that no one knows where Susan was, he started yelling, "My daughter's missing. Something has happened." Her identification cards and other personal items were found in her room. Her father Dale also noticed the dental floss that Susan always carried with her, so there was no indicated that Susan didn't plan coming back to her room. Susan's parents knew from the start that their daughter was abducted. "We believe Susan was abducted because she was always a very logical and predictable person. Very predictable. If it was one of my other children, I'd say just stand by, they'll be back in 2 or 3 days. But not Susan. She was always very careful," Dale Rancourt said. Rancourt's family was put up in dorms and given campus meal tickets while a search that would eventually see 200 volunteers sweep a 62-square-mile area began. In a 2012 interview with the Daily Record, Susan's sister Judy said they were supported in every way possible by the campus in the following days. Susan's father Dale Rancourt immediately offered a $1,000 reward for information leading to her the place of residence. Search teams from King, Pierce and Kittitas counties, as well as Clay Elm, Thorpe and Ellensburg were mobilized, searching trails and rural areas, even probing an irrigation channel that ran through the campus. Local Boy Scouts also joined in the effort to find her. At the same time, Susan's family flew a private airplane over the area in the hope that they might spot her distinctive yellow jacket from above. Unfortunately, no traces were found, so on May 4th, search efforts were called off, but Campus Police Chief Al Pickles vowed to keep the case open. The circumstances of Susan's disappearance began to be linked to the disappearances of 2 other girls, Linda and Healy in February and Donna Gail Manson in March. People were afraid that there might be a possible disappearance coming in May. Unfortunately, their fears were confirmed, and on May 6, Roberta Parks disappeared. The 4 victims were young college students between the ages of 18 and 21. Furthermore, all of these women had disappeared from college campuses that were close to highways. In May 1974, Thurston County Detective Paul Barcliffe contacted other law enforcement agencies to ask if they had similar cases. On July 3, 1974, representatives from numerous law enforcement agencies throughout Washington state gathered to discuss the situation. Although they had no evidence that a crime had been committed, they were horrified by the fact that so many young women were missing. At this stage of the investigation, The only thing that connected the disappearances was the complete lack of evidence in both cases. After 11 months of her disappearance, forestry students discovered a skull on Taylor Mountain. The skull belonged to Brenda Ball, a 22-year-old woman who had vanished in June of 1974. This gruesome discovery led to a full-scale investigation of the area. The following day, King County Detective Robert Keppel was searching the site when he tripped over a branch and stumbled a second cranium. The skull in question had a large fracture. Exposure to sunlight had also bleached it. According to Keppel, he knew almost immediately that it belonged to Susan. Unlike the other victims, she had a lot of bridge work done on her teeth. Shortly afterwards, the police formally identified her skull using dental records. During a search of the site, the 𝙎𝙎𝙉𝙉 team also discovered a piece of a yellow jacket. Susan's father said he had expected the search to end this way, but confessed that they still secretly hoped that Susan would return safe and sound. According to the police officers, Susan met Ted Bundy on her way from students' meeting to her friend's house. Witnesses said they have seen a man with his arm in a sling on campus that evening. Probably Bundy approached Susan, pretending that he can't carry a stack of books to his car and asking her for help. Susan, who was very empathetic, helped him. After Susan agreed to help Bundy carry his books, the pair walked up the pathway on the western side of the library before turning right towards Chestnut Street. At that point, they crossed the road and headed north towards the railway trestle where Bundy parked his car. When they were around the car and Susan turned and bent down to put the books inside, he hit her in the head with a crowbar. Then he lifted her unconscious body into his car and drove away. That was Bundy's modus operandi, pretending he has his arm broken and asking for help in taking his items to the car. But in this case we know where Bundy possibly kidnapped Susan, because he failed with another girl just few hours before Susan's abduction. On Wednesday, April 17, 1974, Ted Bundy asked Kathleen DeLevo to help him in carrying his books to his car. Kathleen agreed, but when they arrived to the car, she noticed that the plaster on the man's arm was applied unprofessionally and she noticed that the passenger seat was missing. She did not bend down, as Bundy most likely expected, so that he could stun her. Instead of placing books in the car, she put them on the car's roof. Bundy dropped his car keys and asked if Kathleen could help him find them. Kathleen found it suspicious. Instead, she suggested that they move away from each other so that it would be easier for them to look for the keys. Kathleen found the keys, gave them to Bundy and quickly walked away. All of this happened 2 or 3 hours before Susan's disappearance, so after failing with Kathleen, Bundy approached Susan, who wasn't as lucky as Kathleen. There's a possibility that Bundy knew Susan, at least from seeing. It's confirmed Susan often jogged with Terry Storwick, who was Bundy's school friend. Terry testified that he met Bundy around the time of Susan went missing. He said Ted visited him before May 2, 1974. Although he was unable to remember an exact date, his statement does put Bundy in the area around the same time that Susan disappeared. Susan was very shy, cautious and sensible. Many people wonder how on earth she agreed to help a strange man, even in the middle of the night. It is known that in the time preceding her disappearance she had been working hard on herself. Most likely, she wanted to counter her fear of the dark and combat her shyness. She could know him as well, because he was a friend of Terry, her jogging partner. Before his execution in 1989, Ted Bundy confessed to the murder of Susan Elaine Rancourt. Following his confession, Dale Rancourt stated that his daughter's brutal murder was a puzzle that had vexed his family for many years. In his words, there were only 2 pieces of the puzzle left. The first piece was Bundy's confirmation that he had murdered their daughter. The second was Bundy's execution. "I want him to suffer," Dale said. "I think that if you make someone suffer really bad, then something really bad should happen to you." Even before Bundy's confession, Susan's mother knew that he had killed her daughter. She said that Susan was very careful, but also helpful and would certainly help a man with his arm in a cast without a moment's hesitation. Ted Bundy was executed on January 24, 1989. In the interview for Falling for a Killer, Susan's mother said, "He had to be stopped, and that was the only way, but it was hard for us." Susan's sister Judy said the death penalty is controversial for them, because it means losing another life. Day after Bundy's execution, mother of Susan talked on the phone with his mother Louise Bundy. Louise apologized to Susan's family for everything her son did, and Vivian Rancourt said, "We don't hold any resentment or hatred towards you or your family." Later on the interview she said, It was just two mothers that had lost a child, but she didn't have to apologize. She didn't do this. Her son was sick. Judy Zimmerman, Susan's sister, said, "You should know that men in our family did not feel like we did. My dad wanted to slash his balls off. My dad was very clear about what he would do to Ted Bundy if he was left alone with him for a moment. My husband too, would have just kicked him from here to hell and back." Susan's mother, Vivian, said that the whole situation would have been easier for them if they had received her daughter's body immediately after her death and had known what happened from the beginning. They could bury her and somehow move on. But they couldn't. They spent a year not knowing what happened to Susan, constantly searching for her. Susan's remains were found a year after her death, but authorities held them as evidence for 5 years so the family could not give her a proper burial. She was buried in 1980, but 6 years later they got a call from the police who admitted that they still had some of her remains by mistake, so they had to rebury her. It was a re-experience of pain for the parents and the entire family. For many years, it was believed that only the heads of Bundy's victims were located on Taylor Mountain. All of the bones, apart skulls, were deemed to be of animal origin. But in 2005, the King County Medical Examiner's Office found a box with various remains and identified several to be human leg bones. For this reason, it was decided to contact the families of Bundy's victims to collect DNA samples for later testing. DNA samples were obtained from the families of all Bundy victims except Linda and Healy. Her brother Robert wanted nothing to do with the case because his family had already closed the chapter and didn't want to go through it again. Judy, Susan's sister, was contacted to obtain a DNA sample. She stated that she lives very far away and it would be difficult for her to come to Seattle, but her daughter Kelsey lives nearby and could provide her DNA sample. Judy also asked to be informed of the test results. On June 26, 2008, DNA results from unidentified bones were received. One of 12 bones was identified as Susan's. Her sister Judy and niece Kelsey were informed about it, but they didn't want to take custody of the remains. Because of this, her bones were most likely cremated. In 2012, the Bardo Hall Garden at the Central University of Washington in Ellensburg was dedicated to the memory of Susan. Her sister Judy and mother cut the ribbon to mark the garden's opening. Susan died on April 17, 1974, when she was only 18. If she was alive, she would be 68 years old.